Hey, welcome back. So today I want to do my video on extroverted sensing and defining it. So extroverted sensing is the dominant cognitive function for ESTPs and ESFPs, and it's the secondary cognitive function for ISTPs and ISFPs. And you could keep on going down the list to, the varying levels. So all the other types have extroverted sensing. But in the types that predominantly use it as a strength, and in the way I'm going to be talking about in this video, it's mostly the SP types. So I'll try my best in this video to be a little bit more sensorily interesting. I know I can be a little just like dry information, so I made myself drink a Red Bull in honor of the SE users, try to amp up the energy a little bit. So I'm going to start by taking quotes from Carl Jung, Vanderhoop, and Myers and Briggs and see what did they say extroverted sensing is, how did they define it. So then I'm going to pull together all of the key words, what words were used over and over and over again repetitively, and then what are the key themes? What themes did I notice? So what can we pull together and kind of decide, okay, what is extroverted sensing all about? And then I want to get into kind of the caricatured vibes. So if I take extroverted sensing in a vacuum and I amp up those vibes as a caricature, what does it look like in a picture in America in 2023 if I really play up these vibes? Okay, let's get into what Carl Jung said. So I don't have quotation marks on the slide. I got tired of putting quotation marks, but these are all direct quotes. Unless I put brackets, and that's something that I inserted. No other human type, I think this is funny that they say the word human. What are we talking about, animal types or what? No other human type can equal the extroverted sensation type in realism. So they are the most in realism. The definition of realism is the attitude or practice of accepting a situation as it is and being prepared to deal with it accordingly. So there's a very present tense emphasis on realism. They're accepting it as it is, not what you wish it was or what it could be or whatever, but accepting it as it is and being prepared to deal with it accordingly. As we see later on, be prepared to seize the moment. That's a word that will come up later, or be prepared to jump into action, but very adaptable and able to deal with what is accordingly. His sense for objective facts is extraordinarily developed. His life is an accumulation of actual experience with concrete objects. So this objective, the word objective in personality kind of means external, and the word subjective means internal in the context of personality. So his sense for external facts is extraordinarily developed. This realism with what is externally going on right now. And his life is seen as the accumulation of experience with concrete objects or sensory objects. His life is the sum of basically his experiences with sensory objects. He knows no better use for his sensed experience than to make it serve as a guide to fresh sensations. Anything in the least new that comes within his circle of interest is forthwith turned to a sensational account and is made to serve this end. So I put the definition of sensational, basically causing great interest and excitement. So we have some words coming up. We've got fresh, new, coming in with your circle of interest, like what's interesting, sensational, excitement. And so everything that is seen as a guide for fresh sensations, constantly seeking fresh sensations. From his standpoint, sensation is the concrete manifestation of life, simply the fullness of actual living. His aim is concrete enjoyment. So like the fullness of life, the manifestation of life is sensation. His aim is concrete enjoyment. And basically without the concrete enjoyment, there's not the fullness of life or the full manifestation of life. For true enjoyment, see again we have this word enjoyment. Enjoyment becomes a very common word with extroverted sensing. Sensation is a really common word, and so is enjoyment. For true enjoyment has its own special morality, its own moderation and lawfulness, its own unselfishness and devotedness. It by no means follows that he is just sensual or gross, for he may differentiate his sensation to the finest pitch of aesthetic purity, without being the least unfaithful, even in his most abstract sensations, to his principle of objective sensation. So they're talking about, it's very principled. It's not just sensual or gross, but there's the finest pitch of aesthetic purity. That's something that comes up, this finest pitch of aesthetic purity. It's a kind of a refined nature with the senses. It's not just, it has its own morality, its own lawfulness with like what is too far, not far enough. It's like fine honing in this pitch for senses. So now we get into kind of like the lower levels. Toward the end of each section, they'll get into like how could this negatively impact a type if they're on the lower levels or not at their best, however you want to put it. Upon the lower levels, this is the man of tangible reality with little tendency either for reflection or commanding purpose. To sense the object, to have, and if possible, to enjoy sensations is his constant motive. So I talked about at the lower levels, it might be difficult for reflection or thinking about purpose. All they want to do is just enjoy sensations. That's the only motive. He frequently has a charming and lively capacity for enjoyment. He is sometimes a jolly fellow and often a refined aesthete. So once again, we get this word refinement, charming, lively. Once again, the word enjoyment over and over and over again. Conjectures that transcend or go beyond the concrete are only permitted on condition that they enhance sensation. There was this ESTP that Gary used to hang out with a lot, and I would mention patterns sometimes, and I could tell he just didn't really care about them. He didn't really, okay, it's just conjecture, I suppose. But I was I've noticed that people have so many social expectations on adults, but they don't have a lot of social expectations on kids. And they just think that, if an adult is dancing, it's weird, but if a kid does it, it's cute. And I was I kind of just want to feel like I'm allowed to do whatever kids are allowed to do. If kids would do it and it's not weird, then I feel like adults should be able to do it and it's not weird. And that was probably one of the only times he was ever remotely interested in something, in a pattern that I brought up, and he was oh, that is so interesting. It's big eyes or whatever. So that was interesting. So this kind of conjectures or patterns or whatever, it's not necessarily that interesting to them, but in this case, this dancing would enhance sensation. This would be more adults dancing. So in that case, it was found interesting. He merely desires the strongest sensation, and this, by his very nature, he can only receive from without, externally. What comes from within seems to him morbid and objectionable. So this is a key phrase, strongest sensation. He desires the strongest sensation. This is something that I find to be true. When you think of not just riding a bike or whatever, but trying to do a wheelie on a bike, just taking it a little further. How can you make the sensation even stronger? Not just listening to music, but listening to loud music. How can you make it the strongest sensation? And then things that come from within. So this could be purpose, or this could be reflection, things like that. To SE seems morbid and objectionable. So now, of course, you would combine SE with other functions, including introverted functions, so this would get balanced out. But SE in a vacuum without any other functions maybe is not so into these things that come from within. Okay, so now I want to move into Vanderhoop. And I want to make mention that Vanderhoop uses the word instinctive instead of sensing. So whenever you see the word instinctive, like an instinctive extrovert, he means extroverted sensing. The life of the instinctive extrovert is determined by impressions received from without, to which he reacts with his instinctual impulses. So it's a bit, once again, we have this word without, the kind of this external emphasis. You get this impression externally to which you react with your instinctual impulses, or we could say with your sensory impulses. We're kind of using those words synonymously. So the word react will become a theme as well. And Carl Jung talked about the extroverted sensors are the best with realism. And realism is accepting things as they are in the present moment and being able to respond accordingly. Or we could say being able to react accordingly based on, your impulses or your instincts or your sensing impulses. Now we get into children of this type. It's so fascinating. Just like a recap. So TE, they wanted to be authority as children. FI, they seemed gentle and dreamy, and they were disappointed in the world at an early age. TI, very stubborn, hard to convince that they're wrong. Extroverted, feeling they idealize their parents. Now we get into extroverted sensing and how they are as children. In children of this type, it is possible to observe at a very early age that sensations are for them of particular significance, and that they very quickly become at home in the world of facts and things. At the same time, they are strongly reactive. If an object catches their attention, they at once seize hold of it, or they go after it and study it from all sides. He can, with difficulty, restrain his impulse to gobble up the things that tempt him. So this is very interesting just as a child. And this is something that I see very much, if an object catches their attention, they at once go after it, study it from all sides. And here, we have the word react again, we have the word impulse again. With difficulty, they can restrain their impulse, but there is, they make mention of an impulsive tendency. Gobble up the things that tempt him. That's a very sensory phrase, gobble up the things that tempt him. So yeah, this is beginning a theme of reactive and impulsive. So yeah, and particularly as children, I do see that with extroverted sensors, the impulsivity and reactivity is strongest at a young age, and then over time, they mellow out. So then here it says, at a later age, also, facts perceived through the senses remain for people of this type the only reality. They never linger over reflections and principles. They are, to an extreme degree, realists. Their reactions drive them from one sensation to the next. They are thus strongly influenced by their environment, but are nevertheless not entirely passive within it. So many things to unpack in this quote. So at a later age, maybe not so impulsive, but still kind of the external facts, that's still the reality. And still, they don't have a tendency, this function in a vacuum, without any other functions, they don't have a tendency to linger on reflections, to linger on principles, and to an extreme degree, they're realists. And realists meaning they accept things as they are. And when they say to an extreme degree realists, that's not necessarily thinking about reflections or principles or what do I make of what is. It's just, this is what is, and I'm ready to react to it. Their reactions drive them from one sensation to the next. It's a instinctual, it's driving them. The reactions drive them from one sensation to the next. And they are nevertheless not entirely passive within their environment. This is a theme that has come up with all the extroverted functions, not passive. So for extroverted feelers, they're not passive with the feeling environment. They're not just taking the emotional temperature, but they're also the thermostat raising the emotional temperature. For extroverted thinkers, they might see that things are not moving efficiently, and they're not just passively going to stand by. And it said that they liked to govern, they like to dictate and command other people. So once again, this is another extroverted function, not passive within their environment. So it said that they're like seeking the strongest sensations, and they're not passive within their environment. So it's not that they just want strong sensations, but they're going to actively put strong sensations out there. They feel at home in the world, accept things as they are, and know how to adjust themselves to circumstances. Very adaptable. Since their acceptance of things as they are extends to themselves, they are occasionally a little too easygoing towards their own faults. But on the other hand, they do not readily overvalue themselves either. They have, in fact, a tendency to expect too little of themselves, since they are very little aware of their aims and possibilities. So when it talks about them being a realist, it talks about them accepting things as they are, and that includes themselves. And when you're not combining it with other functions, thinking about what things could be, it says they're unaware of their aims and their possibilities. I think there were other quotes that I think I left out about, laziness, expecting too little of themselves, and they see things as they are. They accept things how they are. They don't necessarily desire them to be another way in themselves or others or the world. It's just this is the way things are, so this is the way things are. They are pleasant people, good comrades, and jolly boon companions. I've never heard this phrase before, jolly boon companions. But yeah, definitely very sociable. There is a definite theme of when you're seeking to enjoy things all the time, that's an enjoyable person to be around. One may also include in this type many people of good taste who have developed appreciation of the subtler pleasures of life into a fine art. This is something that where you see, in some quotes they say they desire the strongest sensations. So I'm thinking of like the strongest flavor, like sour gummy worms or something. Like the strongest flavor. I'm thinking like Red Bull. That's a pretty strong flavor. Or fast food. I frequently see SE users like, Taco Bell at the time is kind of outdated now, but Taco Bell was like really big a while back or whatever. Then this is contrasted with the subtler pleasures of life into a fine art. For the sake of some special sensation, they will take up all kinds of things which otherwise would not interest them. They seek intense and unusual sensations, and by no means only those which are pleasant and easily attained. So this is so interesting, seeking out these special sensations. And intense, so we've heard the word strong sensations, we've heard intense sensations, intense and unusual sensations, and by no means are they always pleasant or easily attained. This reminds me of like pranking people. That's not necessarily a pleasant sensation. A lot of pranks are very sensory oriented, like you put peanut butter on the handle of something. And so it's not necessarily pleasant, but it's still enjoying this type of thing, even if it's not pleasant. Or I'm thinking of like, Bean Boozled, those like jelly beans where it's kind of like a Russian roulette and you're like, is it going to be a good jelly bean or a bad jelly bean? I did this with a few SE users and they were just totally into this type of thing. It's not even necessarily a pleasant sensation, but there's something just still enjoyable about being immersed in the sensation. And it's by no means are they easily attained. Like I'm thinking of like some of the Red Bull commercials, where they're doing all sorts of these stunts. Like that's not necessarily, maybe it is pleasant, I don't know, but it's definitely not easily attained. And so they'll like go far out of their way for the sensory thing. Their usual preference is for natural pleasures, such as physical exercise and sport. So this is something that I definitely see, particularly with ESTPs. I've seen a lot of tennis. Tennis provides a lot of quick reaction time because they're very reactive. I talked about the Red Bull commercials, stunts. That's very interesting to them. Wheeling on a bicycle. In uncomplicated people of this type, the inner life plays practically no part. More complicated forms of this type occur where a second function is developed up to a certain point. So this is one thing they talk about. The uncomplicated form would just be full SE vacuum. The inner life doesn't play a part. The introverted functions are very repressed. And I'm thinking of people like who you can kind of see take this arc from this uncomplicated type to this complicated type. If you think of like Emma Chamberlain or Justin Bieber or Alex Cooper or Miley Cyrus, these are people who in their teens when they were younger, very, very SE. There's lots of videos of Justin Bieber like wheeling on a bicycle or doing tricks on a Segway or pulling pranks on people or drinking too much and getting in trouble. Very sensory big things. Emma Chamberlain, when she was in her teens, lots of pranks, very SE. And then they have this character arc, and I've noticed with so many influencers, they hit the world with this SE, and it causes a lot of attention, and people get noticed. And then they get a lot of comments like, hey, this is annoying, because maybe they're lacking this inward reflection. So then over time, they start bringing in this second function, whether it's TI or FI, or if they bring in some of their NI. And now, like Emma Chamberlain, she's got a podcast, and people have a very different impression of her than how she used to be. She's got very good TI at this point. I think Justin Bieber got a little bit more vulnerable in some of his songs. Seems like he mellowed out a little bit. Alex Cooper, seems like she mellowed out a little bit. Miley Cyrus. So these are people, they have this character arc where they go from this uncomplicated type to more of this complicated type, and they're a lot more respected, when they have the balance of both. And the same goes for introverts as well. Introverts would be much more respected if they as well developed a second extroverted function. They appreciate intuitions in the form of wit or jokes, both in themselves and others. So I think like a double entendre, that type of thing could be kind of interesting. It's a playful way to use intuition. So then here we go to some of you get to the end of these quotes and they get toward the more, negative side. What's the negative tendency? A realization of their own potentialities and of the meaning of their lives may easily pass them by. Okay, so now we get into Myers Briggs. Leads to concrete enjoyment, seizing very fully the momentary and manifest existence of things, and that only. So we have this word concrete. Again, concrete shows up a bunch. Enjoyment shows up a bunch. Seizing very fully the momentary existence of things. So it's also, there's like a fleeting nature. It's the present moment, but it's kind of fleeting, and seizing the present moment very fully. Develops attention that is riveted by the strongest stimulus, which invariably becomes the center of interest, so that life seems wholly under the influence of accidental outer happenings. Develops a pleasure-loving outer self. So, these words again, riveting, we've seen exciting before, but riveting stimulus, the strongest stimulus, the most intense stimulus. So we're thinking sensory stimulus. So, what would be the strongest sound? The loudest sound. What would be the strongest visual image? The brightest and boldest image. So we have this push and pull between them liking the strongest and most intense sensation, and we also see quotes about them liking the refined and the subtler sensation. So that's something that seems kind of a paradox within this. They're realistic, they're matter of fact and practical, are endowed with a great capacity for enjoying life and a zest for experience of all kinds. So again, enjoying life, and this word comes up over and over again, and a zest for experience of all kinds. Are apt to learn most and best from experience, making a better showing in life than in school. Are usually conservative, valuing custom and convention and liking things as they are. So it's interesting, they see things as they are, and that's what they like. They don't necessarily want the possibilities, but they just like things as they are. One thing that I think of is, for some reason I hear SE users talking about electric cars. Especially when I was living in Idaho, I would hear about this, and a lot of the SE users were not down with electric cars. They like gas cars. They like things how they are, and they're like, I don't want to move on to electric cars. They primarily rely on the testimony of their own senses, what they see and hear and know firsthand, and thus are always aware of the actual situation around them. This is again a present focus. They're always aware of the actual situation around them. I find that they're very observant, peripheral vision. They'll look, see it. Frequently, they do just as well without a plan. They enjoy dealing with a situation as it arises. So, because it says they're realists. They see things as they are. And they're ready to react accordingly. And here, they enjoy dealing with it as it arises because they're ready. They're ready to be adaptable and deal with it as it arises. Their enjoyment and absorption of facts is an essential function of a vigorous curiosity. They are curious about anything new that is presented directly to their sense. New food, scenery, people, activities, objects, gadgets, and contrivances. Anything mysterious is rather distasteful, as it undermines the security of a factual world. So there's definitely, it's interesting that they like things, they see this is how things are, and I like things how things are. Unless it's a sensory thing sometimes. So and I don't know if we got to this quote yet, but there was a quote how they like things how they are with slight variances. So maybe it's okay, pizza. That's how things, okay, it's a normal, we know what pizza is, with a slight variation, and then that's very interesting. So they like things how they are with slight variations. Anything completely mysterious is distasteful. Therefore, extroverted sensing types are at their best in dealing with variations in the known and familiar, rather than what is entirely new. Their strong point is their flawless handling of things and situations, preferably spiced with some variety. So yeah, this is what I was talking about, like, with pizza or whatever, but, like, I was thinking that sports are a good example of this, because you've played tennis, it's known, it's familiar, you know how tennis works or whatever, but each game is slightly different. It's a variation on it. So it's like it's spiced with a little variety. Or I was thinking about, I think that, if you go on a bike ride and then you try to pop a wheelie, that's a known thing to you, like biking is a known thing, but you're adding a little variety to it. You're adding a little sensing to it by making it a little more fun by popping a wheelie. Or I found that, like, they'll be super down, like if you've been playing tag or something as a kid, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, do you want to play like freeze tag or something? And maybe it's a game they haven't played before, like, oh, freeze tag, okay, that's interesting. That's like a variation on the known. I feel like that type of thing is interesting. Often they have an instinctive affinity for machinery and a sure sense of what it can and cannot be made to do. On the personal side, these types are strong in the art of living. I think that's such a good quote for SE. They're strong in the art of living. They value material possessions and take the time to acquire, care for, and enjoy them. They greatly value concrete enjoyment. So again, this phrase, concrete enjoyment. From good food and good clothes to music, art, the beauties of nature, and all the products of the amusement industry. Even without these aids, they get a lot of fun out of life, which makes them fun company. They enjoy physical exercise and sports, and they are usually good at these. If not, they're good rooters for those who are. But yeah, they enjoy the physical sensation. So I do find that a lot of them are good at sports, particularly ESTPs. And even if they're not good at sports, then I find that they like using their body. Like even if, like I've played spike ball with like ESTPs, for example, and even if they're not necessarily good at it, they put energy into it. You can tell that they're invested and immersed, whether they're good at it or not. I find that they kind of split, the SE users kind of split into two camps. Like I'll see the ones that really like sports or whatever. And then if they're not in that genre, I find that they do really like good food, good clothes, good music, good art, music and nature. So these two, I feel like they kind of split into two camps. Like you're either like enjoying the physical exercise, sports, machinery, that camp, that's more ESTP, I would say. Or you get into like good clothes, good music and art, and that's kind of more ESFP. These types naturally prefer the perceptive attitude, so their virtues tend to be open-mindedness, tolerance, and adaptability, rather than sustained effort, methodology, and decisiveness. I find them to be very open-minded and tolerant, adaptable. I do find all of those things definitely to be true. It's extremely important for these people to cultivate enough thinking judgment or feeling judgment to give them continuity, purpose, and character. Otherwise, there will be danger of laziness, instability, and a generally shallow personality. And in all the functions, Myers and Briggs definitely have made mention of, if you're this function alone, you're going to be missing something. So you need, in particular, your second function, because you need extroversion and extroversion, you need judging and perception. And so your first and second functions will give both of those to you. So in every video, I don't know if I put a quote for each of them here, but in every single function Myers and Briggs are mentioning, work on that second function. Okay, so now I want to get into the themes and the words I saw coming up over and over again. So the first theme I saw was sensation. Number one used word. Sensing, sensation, obviously we're talking about extroverted sensing. So that word came up a lot. We're talking about different variations, concrete sensations, fresh sensations, all sorts of variations. So enhanced sensation, fresh sensations, sensational, enjoy sensations, desire strongest sensation from without, seek intense and unusual sensations. This isn't anywhere near to all the times that some variation of that word was used, but yeah, strong, enhancing sensations, fresh sensations, new sensations. That was definitely the theme. Excitement, or things that kind of seemed exciting. So we've got new, excitement, lively capacity for enjoyment, vigorous curiosity, zest for experiences of all kinds, curious about anything new presented to the senses. There's something about extroverted sensing that there's like an energy to it. Like when you think of exciting and wanting senses, I get the sense that they have a lot of energy. And especially like for their age, when you look at them, as they age, they tend to seem younger than their peers, I've noticed. Just there's a youthfulness to them. Enjoyment. This was probably the second most used word. So many times I saw the word enjoyment or forms of enjoyment. Great capacity for enjoying life, enjoyment of food, clothes, music, and art, concrete enjoyment, enjoy sensations, fullness of living, and experiences. So there's an optimistic side. It's just wanting joy, bringing joy to life. And I feel like the world would definitely be missing something if extroverted sensors weren't there. Fine taste. So this came up over and over again, and it was kind of contrasted from the strongest sensation with the subtle and the refined sensation. Finest pitch, aesthetic purity, refined aesthete, people of good taste, appreciation of subtler pleasures, pleasure-loving, value material possessions, enjoyment of food, clothes, music, and art. So yeah, fine taste. I find that they definitely have strong food preferences, restaurants they like, even if we're talking fast food, very specific fast food preferences. Clothes, a lot of times I'll see them wearing like name brand clothes, like Nike or Adidas. Music, I tend to notice it's like music made for enjoying. Sometimes it's like hip hop. I feel like it's generally happy, lively music. Reactive, and I put the definition for reactive, showing a response to stimulus. There were so many quotes, particularly in Vanderhoop's section, about reacting to stimuli. Reacts with his instinctual impulses, or sensory impulses. Strongly reactive, seize hold of it. Difficult to restrain impulse. Their reactions drive them from one sensation to the next. Seizing very fully. Do well without a plan. Deal with situations as they arise. Adaptability. See it and go after it. Always aware of the situation around them. And then physical exercise and sport. And I find that they tend to be into physical exercise and sports that require an ability for this reactiveness, this reactivity. So yeah, this is a huge chunk of extroverted sensing. It's, the realism is being aware of the present moment and being able to react accordingly, react to stimulus. Stimulus was a very strong word. So instinctual impulses, hard to restrain impulses, or reacting, that was definitely a big part of it. Realistic, so there's realism, realistic, matter of fact and practical, liking things as they are, anything mysterious is distasteful, at their best dealing with variations of the known, absorption of facts, conjectures rarely permitted, at their best dealing with the familiar, spiced with some variety. So yeah, I find that they're very realistic. This is how things are, therefore this is how things are. And so they like the familiar, spice it up with some variety, but in general, they like things best how they are. Jovial, there was a lot about them being charming, lively, jolly fellow, pleasant people, good comrades, jolly boon companions, fun company. And the last one, we get into, the more negative one, I suppose, unreflective. So especially extroverted sensing in a vacuum without a development of their introverted feeling or introverted thinking. Little reflection on purpose. What comes from within seems morbid and objectionable. Never linger on reflections and principles. Little aware of their aims and possibilities. Inner life plays no part. Meaning and purpose in life may pass them by. Expect too little of themselves. Shallow. Okay, so now I want to get into one slide. What are some of the key words all on one slide? So I'll remove my face in a second, but I just want people to understand, if you wanted to screenshot this or show a beginner, what is extroverted sensing and kind of contrast it from the other slides, this is what it looks like. So we've got sensation, enjoyment, fine taste, reactive, realistic, jovial, experience, all about experiences, fun, enhance, particularly enhancing sensations, present moment, stimulus, responding to stimulus, pleasure, seeking pleasure a lot, very curious, wanting to get the zest out of life, concrete, so it's like concrete enjoyment, concrete experiences, lively, interact with objects, impulsive, seizing, I think that's a very good SE word, seizing the moment, seizing the object, adaptability, hands-on application, excitement, practical, experiential learning, stimulation, liking to be stimulated and reacting to stimulus, engaged, intense sensations, or a phrase like strong sensations. And there were a lot of mentions of sport, clothes, things like that. So I've been trying to find images that are kind of cohesive with the rest of the images. And so I chose this lightning bolt because it's kind of a very, it's an intense sensation. When you have like lightning and thunder, you're getting a visual stimulus that's very intense. You're getting a audio stimulus, which is very intense. It's a flash. It's kind of exciting. It kind of seems like it's seizing in a moment. And it's very much in the present moment. It's very fleeting. This is right now, but it's, lightning is, it's quick. It shows the reactivity, maybe the impulsivity, and it's not so much about the future, but it's just like very quick right now. So now I wanted to get into extroverted sensing in a caricature, trying to just bottle up extroverted sensing in a vacuum. And these slides are always so difficult for me to create. With extroverted sensing, my issue was I had too many images. I had slides and slides and slides, and I was trying to pare down, and I just didn't feel like I could encapsulate it in one slide, and I still don't know that I've really achieved that. But I wanted to show in a caricature if I play up the stereotypes of extroverted sensing in a vacuum without other functions to balance it out, what could it look like? So the top two left pictures are both Emma Chamberlain, and I talked about her briefly before, but she really has kind of this character arc that I see with ESPs, which is where their SE gets people's attention, and that's really what made her famous. For a lot of these ESPs, it's their SE that gets them out there and gets people's attention. But then people start complaining that they're shallow or they're annoying, some of these traits that Vanderhoop and Jung talked about, if not balanced with other functions. And when you're young, it's hard to be balanced with other functions. And she came on the scene when, I don't know how old she was, maybe 16 or really young. And then as she's gotten older now, she's like early 20s, she really has a good use of NI and TI. And so a lot of people actually might not think she's an ESTP anymore, but if you watched her content from the beginning, I think it's pretty obvious. But anyways, what I wanted to point out with Emma Chamberlain is this big laugh. Like, see how big that laugh, like, ha! I can't even do it. But a lot of times look at these big eyes, like if something fascinates them, they're like, oh, whoa, what is that? And it's a very SE. If I was going to bottle up SE, it's very strong. And the laugh is almost, there's a movement with the laugh too. Hailey Bieber was standing next to her in this picture, and she like leans away, it's like, ha! And so it's like full body, full immersive. The next image that I wanted to show was I noticed a tendency for ESTPs in particular, but ESFPs as well, is to wear hoodies and to have the hood up for some reason. Most people, I find, like if it's not raining or something, most people don't wear their hood up, but ESTPs, I see them with their hood up a lot, especially like younger ESTPs. Is probably not as relevant for older ESTPs, but this kind of encapsulates some of, they said that SE on its own can be kind of lazy. There were a few quotes about that. I left out some of them, but I think this kind of shows some of it. There's this juxtaposition between like so much energy and wanting all this sensory stimulation, and then also kind of, lazy, I suppose. In her video she talked about just like laying in bed, I guess, for a lot of hours on TikTok. So she's getting some sensory stimulation, but still just kind of like laying in bed. I notice a lot of athletic wear, and it depends on what the person wants. So basketball shorts, yoga pants, hoodies, sweatpants, t-shirts. That's something that I notice very commonly. It's comfy, it's easy, freedom of movement, you're not constricted. The next image is I have two cars. The first one is a Jeep. I rode one time with an ESFP in her Jeep. It was like in Seattle on the freeway. We got the top down, music bumping, and it was a very ESFP characteristic experience, in my opinion. Just like driving on the freeway really fast, music really loud, top down. And that's like an intense, cars can really help intensify a sensory experience. The next car I have is I've known multiple ESTPs in particular who have modded their cars. So they put in their own speakers, they put in their own engine, and it's all for the sensory enhancement. Maybe they paint it themselves, they wanted a brighter color, and they put wheels on it. This is just, if I'm really stereotyping and amping up, cars will amp sensory experiences up. And they will really fine tune it to whatever they see as their aesthetic purity that they really like. And depends on if they lean more toward the intense version, like you can say this green car, I would say that's leaning more toward the intense SE, strongest sensation. The white Jeep, maybe that's leaning more toward the refined. There's still a subtle boldness to it, but it's white, so it's not like green in your face. The next picture, I just wanted to point out, I see a lot of SE DOMs wearing until they got popular, a couple years ago, graphic tee, really baggy graphic tees became popular. But even before they were popular, I would see SE DOMs wearing these really baggy graphic tees. And then, I don't know if you can really tell, but ripped jeans, that's something I noticed with SE is ripped jeans. I'm really stereotyping at this point. And Doc Martens. So every year there is a shoe that comes out that is it's kind of a big deal. So a few years ago it was Doc Martens. Maybe 2 years ago it was Nike Blazers. Maybe a year or two ago it was Jordans. So there's a shoe usually around the price point of $150 that becomes kind of the it shoe for that year. Same with guys. The Nike 270s were popular. And so if I'm really caricaturing SE, it's this, they care about, especially younger and especially ESFPs with clothing, getting into the it shoe of the summer. And I do find slides, in the bottom left, you can see Justin Bieber's wearing slides, or even before that type of shoe became kind of popular, years ago, Adidas slides or Nike slides, very, very casual athletic looking with socks a lot of times. Then Red Bull. Okay, I put the Red Bull there. Energy drinks will enhance the sensory experience. You're getting more energy, enhancing the experience. So I definitely, if I'm caricaturing SE, I do see ESTPs in particular drinking energy drinks. On the right-hand side, I have fries. Like, you can only choose one, pick which fries. And I just put this on here because I see a lot of SE users with junk food frequently. They like eating out, in my experience. Like, it said that they like good food. And, they like the fine things. So there was nothing in here about wanting to save money necessarily. There was nothing in here, you got other functions. But for SE in particular, there's nothing in SE exclusively that's about wanting to save money or anything. So I find that they like to eat out. Like, if you like good food, there is something, I heard an SE user once describe American fast food. It's like fast food in America is exquisite. So it's kind of interesting, this exquisiteness with American fast food. On the bottom left, we have Justin Bieber. There's lots of SE, especially when he's younger. I noticed that SE users will kind of mellow out. So as getting if you're someone who's not in your teens and 20s and you have SE, some of this probably won't apply. But if I want to caricature SE, it's at its strongest probably when people are in their teens. So I do have a lot of young people here, like teens and 20s. And the older they get a lot more mellow. A lot of, once you get an ESTP in their 40s, they still seem more energetic than their peers, but it's definitely not this so much, because it's a sensing function and your body's going to be affected over the years, the way you can handle things sensory. I've heard some ESTP, there's one, I was talking to him, he was in his 60s, and he's like, my body, he's like, it's not doing good, and he's like, it's not the age, it's the wear. And so he's just talking about he's gotten his money's worth out of his body, basically, really used it. So anyways, this picture of Justin Bieber, what I wanted to point out was the socks with slides, also the basketball shorts. I think basketball shorts are really something I see a lot, sleeping in basketball shorts, walking around your house with basketball shorts. That's something that I've seen pretty common. The next picture, I've got Alex Cooper. So I just wanted to point out, once again, we have the sweatpants. This is a coordinated set. This is obviously a posed picture, but I still want to point out that to a lesser degree, I see SE users sit like this. They sit kind of man-spreading, like what you associate with man-spreading. They sit big draping over things. This is a posed picture, but to a lesser degree like that. And she's wearing Jordans, very similar deal. The dyed hair sometimes you'll see. Like Emma, she's dyed her hair a bunch. She's dyed her hair a bunch. Miley Cyrus has dyed her hair a bunch. So playing with the senses is something I see. Alex Cooper is another one of those influencers who came on the scene in the SE, hit people in the face, and then people said that she was annoying or whatever. So now she's developed some of her introverted functions, and now she might not even strike people as an SE dom at this point when she does her interviews, like I saw when she interviewed Hailey Bieber, for example. I got another picture of Justin Bieber. I think he's wearing Nikes right there. The beanie, a beanie's another thing I noticed. Baggy t-shirt, that's another one of the caricatures. And he's trying to wheelie on a bicycle. So it's not just enough to ride the bicycle, but wanting to wheelie, get more sensation out of it. And then lastly, I've got people playing spike ball. So it said that they were into, clothes, which I've definitely mentioned a ton here. It said they're into food, which I've mentioned here. And then it said that they were into sport was another thing that they mentioned. And music, and I mentioned loud music when I talked about the Jeep. But sport, I find that even if they're not good at sports, I find that they feel really in the moment when they can be reactive. Sports really hone that reactivity skill. And I find that they put their whole body into it, even if they're not good at it. So spike ball is one where there's no sides to the net, so they love to jump over the net, and then they're hitting it backward, and you're hitting it backwards, and it can be, if you're playing with people that are really good, it's really a fast game that requires quick reaction time. And also they're diving and on the ground, and so that's something I felt like this picture. The guy looks a little older, maybe. I was trying to get a little bit of age diversity, but when I'm caricaturing SE, younger is going to caricature it a little bit better. So yeah, one thing that I want to make mention of is that this is kind of the analogy that I've given in all these videos, but if extroverted sensing is blue paint, it's not necessarily a full picture, you know what I mean? So you as an individual are not only extroverted sensing, you're not only blue paint, but you might take introverted feeling, which is yellow paint, and you mix those together and you get a little green. And so if I'm describing this full blue paint and then you're over here and you're green and you're I don't know if this is really describing me, and it's true, it's because it's not. I'm really leaning into only the blue paint, only extroverted sensing, or if you have extroverted sensing second, you add even more white paint, and so it's kind of watered down a little bit more, and so it's an even lighter blue. And, the further it gets down the stack, it's a lighter and lighter and lighter blue to the point where it might not be much of this at all. You're only getting inklings of this. And so I want to mention that, I notice a lot of extroverted sensors that maybe they don't dress like this. I would say t-shirts pretty common, casual wear is pretty common. But, jeans and a t-shirt, that's perfectly normal. And it depends on, do they dress themselves? Does their spouse dress them? I notice, STPs in particular are very casual. A lot of these outfits are very SFP. I think probably Alex Cooper and Justin Bieber are both SFPs, so it's a little, you get a little bit of a different flavor. The guy on the far right playing spike ball, that looks a little STP to me, if I'm really just caricaturing. But this is just a caricature stereotype. I'm really trying to play it up to what type of things do I notice with extroverted sensors. So yeah, if you want to know more about your personality type, if you're an ESTP or an ESFP, if you want to look in the description box below, I have videos about each of the personality types, and I've got playlists for each of the personality types. So this is just SE, so if you want it a little bit more tailored to ESTP or ESFP, or if you're one of the introverted types, you can look in the description box, and I've got videos about each of the types that are a little bit more tailored and not just about the cognitive function. So yeah, check those out in the description box. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.